LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the February 12th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup, the 199th episode of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out 24 of the weekend's best clips, most newsworthy, most informative for what should be a really educational, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. As usual, my clips come mostly from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. I also have some political comedy, both from last night's Saturday Night Live, including Melissa McCarthy coming back and doing another great Sean Spicer impression. Also some clips from Real Time with Bill Maher last Friday, including his interview with Senator Al Franken. You can see the 5 topics I'm covering down in the video description. It's kind of a longer show. The clips are about an hour long, so the commentary will probably be about that long. If you start getting bored with a topic and you're watching as a recorded show, I put time indexes down there so you can go to the next topic or whichever topic most interests you. I also have a link down to this clip list that I'm using to follow along. You may not understand all the notes, but you should at least be able to figure out who's talking in each clip, and you can sort of go between them that way if that is how you want to navigate the 1.5 to 2 hour video I think I'm about to broadcast here. But you can see those, like I said, the 5 topics are mostly ways that Donald Trump has been losing this week. He's been a big loser this week, especially on his Muslim ban, losing the Ninth Circuit, his fight with NORDSTROM, some revelations about ties with Russia with his National Security Advisor Mike Flynn. There's some big resistance growing to Donald Trump's administration. And then finally, there's this immigration roundup with ICE agents, which may not seem like a loss, but when I get to that topic at the end, I'll explain why I think it may be his biggest loss of all. But like I said, I want to start off with political comedy, a couple clips from Saturday Night Live, and then one from Real Time with Bill Maher, starting, of course, with Melissa McCarthy doing Sean Spicer in the cold open. This time they started Saturday Night Live with her impression, and it covers a couple of those losing topics from Donald Trump, both the Muslim ban that she starts off with, and then you'll see she actually finishes up with a sort of a skewering of the whole NORDSTROM situation, which I will talk about after we watch that clip together over here.
I'm going to open it up for questions, and I'm going to probably freak if you start asking stupid ones. Speaking of freaks and stupid ones, Glenn Thrush, New York Times, stupid hat, go!
Look, I just wanted to know what the president intends to do now that the appeals court denied your request to stop the travel ban.
You're testing me, big guy. Look, it's simple. If the appeals court won't do what's right, President Trump will see them in court, specifically the People's Court.
That isn't real.
That isn't real. I'm Glenn, and I'm not really. It is real, Glenn. It says that right before each case, Glenn. It says the cases are real. The rulings are final. Don't F with me, Glenn. Next question. Extreme vetting.
But what does that mean, extreme vetting?
What does it mean? It means it's extreme. Okay, you know what? Spicy's gonna explain it so you dumb babies can understand it. So I guess I can't use my big words. I'm gonna have to use my dollies. All right, you ready for dollies? You can understand what's going on? Here's how it's gonna go down. You've got your TSA agent right here, okay? And first you got Barbie coming in. Nice American girl back from a dream vacation. We know she's okay because she's blonde. So she gets in. Easy, we understand that. Perfect. Now who's up next? Uh-oh. Uh-oh, it's Moana. Whoa, slow your roll, honey. And then we're gonna pat her down. And then we're gonna read her emails, and if we don't like the answers, which we won't, boom, Guantanamo Bay. All right, let's go. Next question. Yes.
Yes, earlier this week you said there was a terrorist attack in Atlanta.
Yeah, I said that wrong when I said it, and then you wrote it, which makes you wrong. Because when I say something wrong, you guys should know what it is I'm meaning. Wrong or right, you're wrong. And that's why you're here. Obviously, I meant Orlanta.
Orlando.
Okay, you know what? Okay? Look, the problem is all these terrorist instances and incidents that you're not reporting on. Okay, I have a whole list here of acts that you guys never even write about. Never covered them once. Let's read from the list. Okay, the Bowling Green Massacre. Okay, not the Kellyanne one, the real one. Okay, the horror at Six Flags. The slaughter at Fraggle Rock. The night they drove old Dixie down. Okay? And then there was some light terrorism this week when Nordstrom's decided to stop selling Ivanka Trump's line of clothing and accessories. Okay, and that's Nordstrom's loss. Because these are high quality products. In fact, I'm wearing one of her bangles right now. It's beautiful, it's shimmery, it's elegant, and at $39.99, it is an unbelievably affordable. Okay? And don't even get me started on her shoes. Because these babies are real head turner.
I thought that was really, really good. Or I was reading the live comments along the way, and I saw Sean Sims post the comment that the Saturday Night Live clip was hilarious. I have to agree. The one criticism I would have is the doll part was not as funny as the radical moose lambs last week, which of course was one of my favorite parts of the jokes. The impression was also sort of continually funny, both in the slapstick and in some of the details there. The whole Nordstrom thing, I love the parody of Nordstrom, and I have to say I've been way ahead of the curve on the whole liberal support of Nordstrom. All these like silk shirts I wear every week, almost every single one of them from Nordstrom, so that is my support of the liberal bastion Nordstrom department stores. No, I don't know why that's gotten so political, but it's kind of strange, though I will go into some of the actual facts of what Ivanka Trump and Kellyanne Conway and Sean Spicer did regarding that, and that'll be later in the show. But I also really liked the part at the beginning there where she talked about People's Court, and that was more about the Muslim ban, and it was actually kind of a setup for a later entire segment they had. Oh, and by the way, if you want to watch that whole Saturday Night Live Melissa McCarthy impersonation of Sean Spicer, there's a link down in the video description to the entire video free on YouTube. And every one of the Saturday Night Live videos I'm showing is actually available free on the Saturday Night Live channel on YouTube tonight. This next one is the People's Court segment, where they have Donald Trump versus the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal judges, which I thought was kind of funny in some ways, and then I have sort of a, well, it's not really a nitpicky criticism, it's just a criticism if you actually read the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals opinion, which they don't get right in this Saturday Night Live skit, which, you know, it's a joke, so you don't expect them to be entirely accurate, but I'll explain the mistake they made after we watch that 2-minute clip from last night on Saturday Night Live with Alec Baldwin as Donald Trump and Cecily Strong as the judge in People's Court over here.
The plaintiff, the President of the United States. He claims that some phony judges are being very mean to him. He's asking for broad, unchecked power. Will he get it? These are the defendants. They're 3 judges from the Ninth Circuit Court who heard the case for Trump's travel ban and said, "Not in our house." They're accused of letting bad hombres pour into this country.
Judges, do each of you swear to tell the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
We do.
Mr. President.
I'm good.
Be seated.
All right. Thank you. First of all, Mr. Trump, you understand this is a TV court, right?
That's okay. I'm a TV president.
All right, so your travel ban has been rejected as unconstitutional once again, but here you are. What are we doing here, man?
Well, thank you, Judge, or what do you call a lady judge? A flight attendant? Something like that? I signed a tremendous travel ban. I didn't read it, but I signed it. People took pictures of me holding up the paper, very official. And these judges have been very disrespectful. I'm right, they're wrong. I want the ruling reinstated. I want the ban reinstated. Also, I want $725.
Okay. You know, earlier, this woman asked me to award her joint custody of a snake, and she had more of a case than you, okay? All right. Let me ask the circuit court judges.
So-called.
Excuse me?
So-called judges.
Excuse me, Mr. Trump. These three are federal judges, okay? They're actually more real than I am. All right, judges, why did you agree with the lower court's rejection of the ban?
Your Honor, it was our conclusion that the ban violated the Establishment Clause because it included a religious test.
Wrong. Overruled.
President Trump...
So actually, and I thought Donald Trump's impression was better this week. I don't know if it was because it wasn't in the cold open or what about that skit made him do a better impression this week than what I've been criticizing the last several weeks. And so I like that part. And I also, that joke where the judge, Cecily Strong, was saying that this is just a TV court and he said that he's just a TV president, that I thought was also funny. But the part at the end where the circuit judges said the reason they found Donald Trump's Muslim ban to be unconstitutional was because it was a religious test under that violated the Establishment Clause. That was actually an issue that the judges, if you read the opinion, decided they weren't going to reach. Instead, they actually found it unconstitutional on due process grounds. That was the issue that they used. So that was a mistake, but it's just Saturday Night Live. It's not like some sort of legal journalism, so you can't really fault them too much. And before I get to the real news, both about all the problems that Donald Trump's been having, and then I will go through each one in series, I want to show one more political comedy clip. This is Bill Maher in his monologue last Friday talking about how it's been a good week for the resistance and Donald Trump keeps losing this week, and he mentioned several issues, and I will talk about a couple of them after we watch that clip together here.
But you know what? This was a good week for the resistance. This was a good week for checks and balances. A good week for maybe surviving President Man-Baby. Because a federal appeals court unanimously ruled against his Muslim ban, which means refugees from Syria, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, Libya, Sudan, Somalia are once again free to come here and be Uber drivers. How about that, ladies and gentlemen? Yeah, how about that? Turns out a law isn't just something Steve Bannon writes on a napkin and Donald Trump signs while making his smart face. So, Trump has now lost twice in court. We found out this week his closest advisor, Kellyanne Conway, and his national security advisor, Mike Flynn, are being investigated for ethical misconduct. They told Donald Trump today that his wall, his beautiful wall, is going to cost twice as much that he thought. It's almost like he's losing so much, he's tired of losing. Is that... And, you know, this is a guy who takes losing well, doesn't he? Yeah, when the ruling came down from the court, he was like, "Oh, see you in court. See you in court. They're judges. Of course you're going to see them in court." It's like saying, "Hey, Chris Christie, I'll see you at the Cheesecake Factory."
So I actually liked a lot of those jokes, although I thought especially about how the resistance is doing well, and it's sort of Bill Maher's job in some ways to buck up those of us on the left, although he's been doing a lot of internecine warfare, as I showed last week. But that last joke was kind of a cheap, easy joke on, it's like a fat joke against New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, although I will actually have a clip of Governor Chris Christie when I get to the immigration section at the end. That's one of the last, or is it? It's actually the very last clip in the show will be Governor Chris Christie. So if you're a Chris Christie fan, stay tuned for that. And the 3 immigration clips are definitely worth watching because, like I said, that may end up being Donald Trump's biggest loss of all. But that actually gets me to a couple of the news clips that are giving an overall report on how Donald Trump has lost a lot this week. First, a shorter one from CNN's State of the Union. This is Jake Tapper. First off, saying the State of the Union is that we're on dictator watch or dictatorship watch. And at first I thought, oh, that's going pretty far about Donald Trump, but he was actually talking about the dictator in North Korea doing this missile launch. And then he talks about some of the other issues in the week. And then, of course, he talks about how CNN is still being frozen out by the Trump administration, as I will discuss after we watch that minute and 20-second news roundup of the week from CNN this morning. State of the Union, Jake Tapper here.
Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is currently on dictator watch. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un appears to be testing new President Trump, launching a ballistic missile in defiance of a UN resolution. Even more pointedly, the launch came as President Trump was hosting Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe at Mar-a-Lago. Abe called the act intolerable, but President Trump did not directly address the missile launch, giving instead this 14-second statement.
I just want everybody to understand and fully know that the United States of America stands behind Japan, its great ally, 100%. Thank you.
By this morning, President Trump had moved on to domestic matters, tweeting about the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, raids over the last few days, saying, quote, "The crackdown on illegal criminals is merely the keeping of my campaign promise. Gang members, drug dealers, and others are being removed!" Exclamation point. ICE said in one operation in Los Angeles, 164 nationals had been arrested and 37 of them were deported to Mexico. But not everyone swept up in these raids is a gang member or drug dealer or otherwise violent criminal. We asked the White House for a guest to discuss these and other matters with us this morning. They did not respond to that request. I am joined now by the Republican governor of New Jersey and former advisor.
And that's when they get to Chris Christie. And like I said, that's on the immigration issue, the last clip I will show. And it may not seem to fit into Donald Trump's big losing week this week with all the other things that are obvious losses. But like I said, I will explain that when I get to the last 3 clips at the end. But the immigration thing and the North Korea thing weren't the only troubles that Donald Trump had this week. And in fact, NBC's Meet the Press did a much more thorough job than State of the Union did there, or any of the other programs, I think, in terms of rounding up all the ways that Donald Trump has growing resistance and is lost in court and lost on getting into trouble with his National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and Russia, and with Kellyanne Conway and Nordstrom, and this is all talked about in, this is about a 4-minute clip from NBC's Meet the Press with Chuck Todd this morning that I will talk about after we watch it together here.
In just the past few days, President Trump's travel ban was struck down unanimously by a federal appeals court, and the administration now says it may rewrite the order. NBC News confirms the National Security Advisor Mike Flynn did in fact talk to Russia's ambassador about U.S. sanctions before President Trump took office, a possible violation of the law. The president attacked Nordstrom in a tweet for dropping part of his daughter Ivanka's clothing line from its stores. Then his counselor, Kellyanne Conway, in trying to defend him, ended up publicly rebuked for using the White House to promote Ivanka's products. Progressives took a page from the Tea Party, confronting Republican lawmakers with angry crowds at town halls. And then, of course, early this morning, North Korea launched a ballistic missile, perhaps testing President Trump's resolve against Pyongyang early in his presidency. And as we've seen every Saturday of the Trump presidency so far, thousands gathered across the country, this time in favor and in some cases against Planned Parenthood. All of this in just the last few days in this 1 week of the Trump presidency.
We'll win that battle, but we also have a lot of other options, including just filing a brand new order on Monday.
For President Trump, it's been a week of setbacks and a series of self-inflicted wounds. In the courts, a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals panel unanimously refused to reinstate its travel ban, which even Mr. Trump's Homeland Security Secretary says was rushed out. President Trump attacked the judiciary.
Courts seem to be so political,
leading to a rebuke from his own Supreme Court nominee.
He feels strongly about the independence of the judiciary, but he's also been very clear that he is not commenting on a specific case.
Now Mr. Trump says he is considering rewriting the travel ban altogether. And then there's Russia. After repeated denials, the White House acknowledged that National Security Advisor Michael Flynn could not be certain that he did not discuss U.S. sanctions against Russia with Russia's ambassador the month before Mr. Trump took office. U.S. intelligence sources tell NBC News he did. This contradicts the earlier claims of a parade of administration officials, including the vice president.
They did not discuss anything having to do with the United States' decision to expel diplomats or impose a censure against Russia.
The subject matter of sanctions or the actions taken by the Obama administration did not come up in the conversation.
On Air Force One Friday night, the president was asked about the reports on Flynn, and the president did not go out of his way to defend him or debunk the story.
I don't know about it. I haven't seen it. What report is that?
And then there's the family businesses. President Trump attacked Nordstrom for announcing it would no longer carry his daughter's shoe line, tweeting, "My daughter Ivanka has been treated so unfairly by Nordstrom. She is a great person, always pushing me to do the right thing. Terrible." That tweet could haunt the president legally. And his advisor, Kellyanne Conway, doubled down.
Go buy Ivanka's stuff is what I would tell him. I'm going to give a free commercial here.
That got the attention of Republican Oversight Chair Jason Chaffetz, who chastised Conway. The president reportedly took umbrage at his own press secretary's response.
Kellyanne has been counseled.
Meanwhile, around the country, from Utah to California, Tennessee, Ohio, to Kentucky,
Mitch is a chicken.
And Georgia.
Shame, shame, shame.
Republican lawmakers are facing large, hostile audiences at town hall events, an early indication that Trump's opposition is energized. Even some Trump voters who support his policies are questioning the president's tactics.
We don't always agree with the way he presents things, but we definitely are on board with his agenda.
We have people in our family who are like that. You love them to death, and you go, "Ugh, did he just say that?"
And joining me now.
So that's Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press with what I thought was the most comprehensive roundup of all the problems that Donald Trump has been facing, except maybe for the ICE raids, which wasn't as focused on as I think it possibly deserves. But I do think that they went over all the other problems, the Russia problem, the Nordstrom problem, the Muslim ban problem, and then Chuck Todd actually had an interview with Stephen Miller, the senior advisor to the president, who's been kind of behind the scenes. He's done a couple interviews, but these are his... He did almost the full Ginsburg on the Sunday morning news analysis shows this morning. The only one he didn't go on was CNN State of the Union, because as you saw at the end of that Jake Tapper clip I showed before the Meet the Press clip, Jake Tapper said, "We asked for someone from the administration to come, and the only one we could get was New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who they tried to ask him if he even talks to the president anymore, and he couldn't even really say." But I wanted to move on to this Stephen Miller interview about the Muslim ban, and he said some kind of extraordinary things. This Chuck Todd question, I think, was the one that got into the legal issues the most, and especially talked about that, I see all these conservatives quoting the statute, federal statute, I think it's 8 U.S.C. 1182, that says, Congress gave the president power to exclude, any alien, any alien or any class of aliens, and so it's all this power, and just read the statute. In fact, Donald Trump, in one of his brief news conferences, actually read the statute when he was attacking the judges. And you'll see that Chuck Todd, he talks about another part of the statute and gets in an argument with Stephen Miller about that, and I will discuss it a little more after we watch that 2-minute, 50-second clip together here.
Hey, good to be here, Chuck.
Let me start with the decision by the Ninth Circuit and the president himself saying to reporters that a new order may be drafted. Is that what you and others are doing right now, drafting a new order, since essentially the Ninth Circuit seemed to give you a roadmap of how to draw up something slightly more narrow that would accomplish your goal?
Well, we're considering all of our options right now, Chuck. That includes you can continue the appeal on the 9th, you can seek an emergency stay at the Supreme Court, you can have a trial hearing on the merits at the district level, or you can take it en banc for the emergency hearing also at the Ninth Circuit. And yes, you could pursue additional executive actions. The bottom line is that we are pursuing every single possible action to keep our country safe from terrorism. And I also want to be clear. We've heard a lot of talk about how all the branches of government are equal. That's the point. They are equal. There's no such thing as judicial supremacy. What the judges did, both at the Ninth and at the district level, was to take power for themselves that belonged squarely in the hands of the President of the United States.
Well, you say that very definitively, but obviously there isn't agreed upon that. Why are you so confident that, for instance, that you believe there is a 1952 law that gives the president the power to decide who can come in and out of this country in a temporary basis? Why do you believe that law supersedes 1965's, which says you cannot essentially decide on who comes in based on origin?
That's a great question, and I'll answer it in full. First of all, we know that the 1952 law, and you're referring to is 212F, 8 U.S.C. 1182F, because if it didn't have controlling supremacy between those two clauses, that would mean, Chuck, that during a time of war, that the President of the United States couldn't suspend admissions from the very country they were at war with. So obviously, that's the controlling clause. Secondly, this is not a decision based upon national origins. It's a decision based upon security conditions in those countries. Syria is a disaster zone. Libya is in ruins. Yemen has a massive resurgent terrorism movement. These are decisions based upon the ability of those countries to cooperate with our intelligence services. As you know, Chuck, this was a decision made in 2015 and 16 in terms of designating these countries. We simply took that intelligence assessment and we took firm action to restrict entry. And the bottom line is the President of the United States, both under his Article 2 foreign powers, under the 1952 statute, has the power to control who enters our country. And you know and I know that no foreign national living in Yemen or any other country has a constitutional right to demand entry into our country.
Well,
it's kind of a straw man argument, and it was kind of especially ridiculous when he said that the 1965 law could not trump the 1952 law because it would mean that if we were at war with a country, the president couldn't exclude the aliens from that country because that would be based on nationality. But, you know, for us to go to war with a country requires a congressional declaration of war, and along with that legislative act usually comes a whole bunch of details, including additional powers regarding enemy aliens, and that was actually something that came up with George W. Bush's treatment of enemy aliens and even enemy combatants, and the war powers a president gets from declarations of war, or in that case the authorization for use of military force that came shortly after September 11th. And so I think that was kind of a ridiculous argument from Stephen Miller, and I give Chuck Todd a little bit of credit there for trying to, you know, contrast the 1965 law with the 1952 law, although there's a much better argument that I'll show in just a couple minutes in just a couple clips from the Attorney General of Washington, Bob Ferguson. He makes a much better argument. But first I want to show one more clip from Chuck Todd's interview of Stephen Miller, where he does a pretty good job, I think, of deconstructing or of pointing out at least the problems with the administration's argument about why they picked these 7 countries. And I will talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together. Let me make sure this is clip number 7. Where?
If you do that, if this was about the security of the country, why wasn't Afghanistan, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, I can keep going down the list, where we have had foreign nationals from those countries that I've listed attempt terrorist acts in this country?
Well, it's a great question. First of all, 72 individuals, according to the Center for Immigration Studies, have been implicated in terroristic activity in the United States who hail from those 7 nations. Point 1. Point 2, the security determination about those countries is based upon an assessment of the threat they present today and going into the future. The security situation in Libya, Yemen, Syria, and other countries designated are squarely different today than they were in, say, 2001 or 2005 or 2010.
But San Bernardino, but Mr. Miller, but San Bernardino happened, the whole point of the president's as a candidate. The whole point of this idea at the time of a full Muslim ban, and then he has since tapered it back, was in response to San Bernardino, where the spouse came from Saudi Arabia of Pakistan origin.
Well, you're 100%. First of all,
you're
100% correct. You're 100% correct that the San Bernardino incident demonstrated the profound degree to which our immigration system is vulnerable to terrorism. And the FBI has information right now that would clearly indicate the extent to which massive numbers of court cases are happening and have happened all over our country relating to terrorist infiltration of our immigration system. But if you look at the executive order, what it spells out is a 90-day period to put in place extreme vetting across the board. So the first 7 countries are based upon our determination about the security conditions in those countries and their ability to cooperate with us. But there's a 30-day period where new security measures are promulgated and a 60-day compliance period. And Chuck, I will be glad to come back on your show when that's done and walk you through how we've kept our country safe across the board from individuals coming into our country who don't share our values and who don't love our people.
Well, it's interesting you say about
I don't know. I mean, this guy does not have the skill of Kellyanne Conway. He's like the latest power inside the administration that you don't normally get to see, who they've thrown out to the press, and because I guess he hasn't had his credibility destroyed as badly as Kellyanne Conway, you know, with her Bowling Green massacre. Although he did mention all these terrorist attacks or attempted terrorist attacks that had been documented by the Center for Immigration Studies, which is this right-wing anti-immigrant group. So I'm not sure I would trust that. And you know, there just really haven't been any terrorist attacks, at least successful ones. There have been some of these like FBI informant created attacks where they like send an FBI informant in to kind of entrap some like dumb Muslim American into like pretending to give material support to ISIS or Al-Qaeda, but they're all like FBI agents, and that certainly happened, and it happened here in Lodi, California, but I wouldn't call that like a real terrorist attack. And you know, the San Bernardino thing where Stephen Miller was saying that, you know, that's right, you're right, Chuck, if you're saying that San Bernardino shows that there's a real problem with our immigration system and that our immigration system is infiltrated with all these terrorists, or whatever it was he said there. I mean, the San Bernardino attack was the main problem behind what happened there, was not our immigration system. Sorry, Trump administration spokesman Stephen Miller, I think you are totally wrong about that. You can let me know what you think down in the comments section. I thought that was pretty bogus and poorly argued. Not as well argued as Kellyanne Conway could have done it, I don't think, but you can let me know what you think. And actually, I want to show a more rigorous cross-examination of Stephen Miller from one of his other appearances. This is on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace, where actually Chris Wallace was pretty dogged in his cross-examination of Stephen Miller on this idea that Donald Trump's executive power on immigration is unreviewable, which of course is ridiculous. And you'll see Chris Wallace actually quotes from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision, the 3-judge panel anyway, which included a George W. Bush appointee and a Carter appointee, and I think the other one was an Obama appointee, if I have that right. But there are 2 Democrats and 1 Republican, 3-0 unanimous decision, and somehow Stephen Miller just has to attack the Ninth Circuit and the judges pretty viciously for an administration official, I think, although not as viciously as Donald Trump has himself, as I will discuss with you. And this goes on for almost 6 minutes. That's why I think it's a pretty dogged cross-examination from Chris Wallace, and I'll discuss that a little more after we watch it together here.
On that, Stephen, that's an argument you've been making this week, that the courts have no place interfering with the president's constitutional powers over immigration. But I want to take you back to what the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said in its ruling upholding the stay of the president's executive travel ban. Here, first of all, is what you had to say this week.
An unelected judge does not have the right to remake the immigration laws and policies for the entire United States of America.
But the Ninth Circuit Court disagreed. Although courts owe considerable deference to the president's policy determinations with respect to immigration and national security, it is beyond question that the federal judiciary retains the authority to adjudicate constitutional challenges to executive action. Stephen, the three judges say you're flat wrong.
No, the three judges made a broad, overreaching statement about the ability to check the executive power and did not even address what I was talking about, which was INA 212F, 8 U.S.C. 1182F, the power of the president to exclude aliens in the national interest.
But they say that the courts have a long history of reviewability here.
No, the Ninth Circuit has a long history of being overturned, and the Ninth Circuit has a long history of overreaching. We don't have judicial supremacy in this country. We have three co-equal branches of government. The Ninth Circuit cannot confer onto a Yemeni national living in Yemen with no status in our country a constitutional right to enter our country. Were such a right to exist, Chris, that would mean every time we deny a visa to a foreign national, they could sue in an American court for damages for lost benefits in terms of welfare and employment. That would be ludicrous. 80 million people visit this country every year through airports, land ports, and seaports. Of course the president has the authority to impose moderate, necessary, and sensible restrictions, including putting in place new vetting procedures to protect this country. That power was delegated to him explicitly by Congress and adheres to him under his Article 2 powers under the U.S. Constitution. This is a judicial usurpation of power. It is a violation of judges' proper role in litigating disputes. We will fight it, and we will make sure that we take actions to keep from happening in the future what's happened in the past. We've had hundreds of individuals enter this country through our immigration system on visas who've gone on to do enormous harm to this country from 9/11 through San Bernardino, through the Boston bombing, in Chattanooga, and on and on and on it goes.
All right. I want to pick up on that and your criticism of the judges, because after Judge Robart's initial order, President Trump tweeted this. I'm going to put it on the screen. Just cannot believe a judge would put our country in such peril. If something happens, blame him and court system. People pouring in. Bad. But now, Stephen, that judge is getting death threats. So the question is, if something happens to him, should we blame President Trump?
This is one of the most ludicrous things that the media does, where when any crazy person in this country issues a death threat, that they then blame a politician or a public official. That is reckless and irresponsible and should never be done. The reality is
but some people would say that personally attacking a judge is reckless and irresponsible. In fact, your own Supreme Court nominee, Judge Gorsuch, called it disheartening and demoralizing.
Statements that you can't criticize a judge demonstrate a profound misunderstanding of what it means to have separate and equal branches. Of course, one branch can criticize another branch of government. It's ludicrous to say that Congress can criticize the president, and the president can criticize Congress, and judges can criticize the president, but the president can't criticize judges.
So Neil Gorsuch was wrong?
I have my opinions, and Judge Gorsuch has had his comments, as you know, misinterpreted and misrepresented by by Senator Blumenthal, who, as we all know, has profound credibility issues.
Well, wait. On the question, first of all, on the question of his saying that he found these remarks disheartening and demoralizing, it wasn't.
That's different than saying.
Wait a minute.
That's different than saying you can't criticize a judge.
Stephen,
I don't think that Judge Gorsuch would say you can't criticize a judge in the United States.
No, but he said that these comments were disheartening, demoralizing. He said it not only to Richard Blumenthal, he said it to Senator Ben Sasse as a Republican.
That is not what Kelly Ayotte put out a statement. That's not what she said he said. You weren't in the room. I wasn't in the room. What we do know is that Senator Blumenthal, and we all know his Vietnam scandal, we know how much he has a credibility problem. It's a serious problem. That's what should be the focus of this conversation, is the degree to which that senator has a serious credibility issue. But not to get off track here, because we're going all over the place. Let's just be very clear and straightforward in saying the following. The United States of America has a terrorism problem. We have had hundreds of cases of foreign nationals entering our country from other countries and plotting, attempting, or even carrying out terrorist attacks. We spend countless dollars a year, and we have thousands of federal officers and investigators who do nothing but run around the country trying to stop terrorist attacks for no other reason than because we made the mistake of letting people in who harbor hatred for this country. Our immigration system should not be a vehicle for admitting people who have anything but love in their hearts for this nation and its Constitution.
I want to ask you, Stephen.
So I think in that clip, first you can see how Stephen Miller, the senior advisor to Donald Trump, and I think he's like this 26-year-old wonderkind. I may have his age wrong, but I seem to remember reading some article about him after the Muslim ban came out that was supposedly written by him and written by Steve Bannon, and he was asked on another show in a clip I decided not to take as to whether he and Steve Bannon wrote the order, you know, when they, whether they would rewrite it, and he said, oh, Steve Bannon had nothing to do with the order and his role has been exaggerated, although he said it was congressional staffers who did it, although he didn't deny that he had some role in it. So he is actually one of the people behind this Muslim ban order, even by the way he answered the question in that clip I'm not going to show. But I thought that Chris Wallace did a fairly good job of cross-examining him there about some of his answers about the judicial power and his attacks on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and especially quoting the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on whether the power of the president is reviewable. But I didn't think Stephen Miller's answer was very credible. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section, and I actually wanted to compare that poor cross-examination, that fairly good cross-examination of Stephen Miller by Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday, where you would think he wouldn't get that strong a cross-examination, with a poor cross-examination, I thought, of Stephen Miller giving a very similar answer. He gave the same answer about, you know, it's not about respecting judges, it's about not respecting judicial supremacy. The Ninth Circuit is engaging in judicial supremacy. He used that, I think, in all four of his interviews. And he went a little bit farther, though. That's why I'm showing this duplicative clip from CBS's Face the Nation. He actually said that people shouldn't question the president's authority, which I thought was a little bit scary, authoritarian, and you know. And by the way, I thought that you could see Stephen Miller was really like a Trumpist in that last clip, because of the way that he went for like the personal attacks against Richard Blumenthal and called him a liar for once saying that he served in Vietnam when he actually served in the Marines during the Vietnam War, but he was never deployed in a war zone. He was like deployed, I think he did like some like Toys for Tots campaign and other stuff, but never saw combat. So it was an exaggeration, but the big Trump tactic is to attack the messenger, call him a liar. Not that Donald Trump doesn't lie like multiple times a day in everything he says. It's just part of the way he, you know, part of his persona, I guess. The character he's playing is the TV president. But like I said, I want to compare that better cross-examination of Stephen Miller by Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday with this not very good cross-examination of Stephen Miller by John Dickerson on CBS's Face the Nation, where he kind of lets it go by. I play the clip to when he changes the subject, just so you can see he doesn't really follow up on Stephen Miller saying we shouldn't question the president's authority. That's a little bit scary, as I will discuss a little more after we watch that clip together here.
On that, when I talk to Republicans on the Hill, they wonder, what is the White House? What have you all learned from this experience with the executive order?
Well, I think that it's been an important reminder to all Americans that we have a judiciary that has taken far too much power and become, in many cases, a supreme branch of government. One unelected judge in Seattle cannot remake laws for the entire country. I mean, this is just crazy, John. The idea that you're going to have a judge in Seattle say that a foreign national living in Libya has an effective right to enter the United States is beyond anything we've ever seen before. The end result of this, though, is that our opponents, the media, and the whole world will soon see, as we begin to take further actions, that the powers of the president to protect our country are very substantial and will not be questioned.
Well, I guess let me step back. The question, as I talk to Republicans on the Hill, is what you're learning inside the White House about the way you do things. It's been pretty busy up there. Just stepping back, do you feel like you and your staff there, that you're in control of events at the White House?
I think to say that we're in control would be a substantial understatement. The President of the United States has accomplished more in just a few weeks than many presidents accomplish in an entire administration. You've seen, for instance...
More in a few weeks than many presidents accomplish in an entire administration. That seems like an incredible overstatement. It's I guess, more Trumpism. Stephen Miller must be a real Trumpist, you know, because there are Democrats and there are Republicans, and then there are Trumpists, and they're like the nonpartisan nationalists who follow the sort of, it's almost a cult of personality. I mean, I'm not saying it's, we're not talking about North Korea style cult personality or Stalin cult personality, or even, you know, certainly not Adolf Hitler. I'm not making the Adolf Hitler. I'm not gonna violate Godwin's law or fulfill Godwin's law, or however you correctly phrase that. But I do think that there is definitely some cult of personality there, and there's also, like I said, the power should not be questioned. That's a little bit disturbing. And before I finish the topic of the Muslim ban, and this is, I think, the longest topic, the resistance topic also has a bunch of clips, like 1, 2, whatever. You can look at the clip list yourself down at a link in the video description. But this is the last one on the Muslim ban. This is actually you know, all those people who are quoting, all those people on the right wing who are quoting 8 USC 1182 section F, subsection F or whatever, that says that where Congress gives the president the power to exclude any alien or any class of aliens for national security purposes or whatever. Well, you'll see George Stephanopoulos talking to the Washington State Attorney General, or Attorney General for the state of Washington, actually reads this statute to him, and he says, yeah, well, you know, Congress can give the president any authority Congress wants to give, the authority, you know, that Congress wants to give him, but it's still subject to the constitutional limitations like due process and the Establishment Clause, and, well, I guess I kind of spoiled the answer, but here's Bob Ferguson, Attorney General of the state of Washington, doing a better job than I just did of explaining it, talking to George Stephanopoulos this morning here.
You know, Stephen Miller cited the law, and we're going to put the law up right now, 8 U.S. Code, which talks about the suspension of entry or imposition of restrictions by the president. And it says that whenever the president finds that the entry of any aliens or of any class of aliens in the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, he may, by proclamation, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as immigrants or non-immigrants, as he may deem appropriate. The law is pretty clear right there, and this is one of those cases where the statutory basis for the president being able to regulate illegal immigration and his national security responsibilities put him in a very strong position, isn't it?
Absolutely, and we recognize that, but there's another document that the president is not reading from, and that's the Constitution. Folks have rights of due process, for example, George, and of course there's broad discretion for the president, but nobody is above the law, and an executive order still must be consistent with our Constitution, and that's the problem that the president keeps running into with federal judges out here in the Ninth Circuit.
And in the Constitution, of course, you have the Establishment Clause and freedom of religion. A big part of your case was bringing up comments made by the president and his allies during the campaign before he was president about the Muslim ban. He now denies that this is a Muslim ban. And is there really any precedent for using campaign statements to establish impermissible motive?
What there is precedent for, George, in courts is if you're looking for an improper motive, which we're certainly asserting, is you can look behind an executive order. That includes statements made by the principals who put that executive order into place. So we will absolutely continue to use those statements. And when this case goes back to Judge Robart, the trial court judge appointed by George W. Bush, who ruled in our favor, we'll have a chance to have discovery. And for those who are not lawyers, as you know, that means we can seek depositions from administration officials. We can ask for documents and emails to get behind what truly motivated that executive order. I absolutely intend to use those tools to continue with this case.
You going to depose the president? Try to?
I won't announce that on national TV, but I can assure you of this. I want to be crystal clear with your viewers. My job as Attorney General is to uphold the rule of law in this country, and I'll use every tool that I have as Attorney General to make sure that the president follows that Constitution.
Mr. Attorney General, thank you.
Well, after hearing basically all that bullshit that is the opposite of what I happen to think based on reading the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals opinion, and based on the fact that I am a lawyer and have a degree and have passed the bar in a couple states and have even looked at some constitutional issues, have some familiarity with concepts like due process and the Establishment Clause. I've done a little bit of work in that area. I wouldn't say I'm like a huge expert, but it's not totally unfamiliar to me. So what Stephen Miller said, bullshit. What Bob Ferguson, Attorney General from the state of Washington, said there, that is actually accurate. Now, as to how the Supreme Court would decide this, well, it might be a 4-4 split. It might actually go the way the Ninth Circuit went. Remember, there were the district court judge is a Republican. One of the 3 Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals judges was a Republican. And it's possible that, I've spent some time when I was a public defender around judges. I actually worked as a law clerk in the federal public defender's office, so I had very slight contact with federal judges and heard stories about a lot of federal judges since I helped the attorneys, and the attorneys had lots of contact with the federal judges. And I can tell you, judges are pretty, as professions go, they're, kind of egotistical people. They like to be in control. It's kind of like doctor personality also would fit in there too, but you don't get to be a judge if you don't have something of an ego. And federal judges even more so, because they have lifetime appointments. Basically, they can do what they want. No one is ever gonna be able to fire them unless they commit some crime or engage in malfeasance. So they're even more egotistical than other judges, and more have a sense of their own power. And I think what Donald Trump did, attacking the judges and attacking the independence of the judiciary, that may have backfired big time, and may even backfire all the way up to the Supreme Court, that he might not even get all 4. There might be judges on the Supreme Court who were offended by what Donald Trump said. That is very, very possible. So I don't think that the analysis you heard from Stephen Miller has a lot of legal weight, and I think Bob Ferguson, the Attorney General of Washington, is much more on point. But like I said, that's the last clip I'm going to show you on the Muslim ban topic. Now I have a couple clips on the Donald Trump versus Nordstrom controversy, and then a couple clips on his national security advisor, Michael Flynn, getting in trouble on his talks with Russia before Donald Trump actually became president. And then I think it's like 7 clips on the resistance to Donald Trump, and 3 clips at the end on immigration. But like I said, I'm going to start with a couple clips here on the Nordstrom thing, which I saw some complaints about my shirt down in the live comments. As I said, all of my shirts, or almost all my shirts, including this shirt, were purchased from Nordstrom. So if you're attacking my shirt, you're attacking the opposition to Donald Trump. I just want you to know that. But on the topic of Nordstrom, if you don't know what happened, you should go back to the beginning of the video where I showed the NBC report, where they talked extensively about how Nordstrom dropped Ivanka Trump's product line, and then Donald Trump attacked Nordstrom, and Kellyanne Conway went on Fox and Friends and actually did explicitly said, I'm doing a commercial for Ivanka Trump's product line. Go and buy Ivanka Trump's product line, which is a violation of federal ethics laws, and that's kind of covered in these next 2 clips. The first one is a clip from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where George Stephanopoulos asks Stephen Miller, from the same Stephen Miller we've been watching, about what Kellyanne Conway did, and he has these talking points he sticks to, that it was someone was treated very unfairly, and what Kellyanne Conway said was a lighthearted comment that no one could have taken the way the media has been portraying it. And you can see him stick to those talking points yourself in this clip.
On Kellyanne Conway, Congressman Chaffetz, Republican chair of the House Oversight Committee, and his Democratic counterpart, Elijah Cummings, have asked the head of the Office of Government Ethics to recommend disciplinary action against Conway for her comments promoting Ivanka Trump's products. Will the president accept that recommendation?
I think people are blowing this thing way out of proportion, if I'm being honest with you, George. I think that what you have is a situation where you had the President of the United States sticking up for a member of his family, and you had a counselor to the president who was making a lighthearted comment in defense of someone who'd been treated very unfairly. I think that the media has taken this to a level it does not merit. And I think anyone watching that interview would understand that it was a lighthearted comment made in defense of somebody who had been treated unfairly, And there really, I think, has been an undue amount of attention given to this issue, especially in light of everything that's happened in the world.
Well, it was
right
the
now.
Republican chair of the House Oversight Committee, Jason Chaffetz, who said she crossed the line in that statement. It wasn't just the media. That is the Republican chair of the House Oversight Committee. And on that point, because it gets to a deeper issue, Sean Spicer from the podium said the decision by Nordstrom to pull those products of Ivanka Trump was a direct attack on the president's policies. Sears and Kmart this week have decided to pull Mr. Trump's home furnishing lines from their websites. Is that a direct attack on the president's policies as well?
I'm not going to make a comment on that. I don't have any information on it. I do want to say that Sean Spicer, as always, is 100% correct, and that what he said is true and important, and I agree with it.
So then you are making a comment on it?
I'm not going to make any new comment. I'm going to stand by the White House press secretary and his comments, and I'm also going to call for sanity in discussing this issue. You had a case where somebody was treated unfairly, the president stood up for a member of his family, and the White House counselor made a light-hearted, flippant comment that nobody would interpret as being what it's been cast as right now by you in the media and others. And I think that everybody has taken this to a degree and to a level it does not merit. And I really hope, George, we can move on to discussing things that the American people care about, like their jobs, like their wages, like their security, like the fact that we have a president who has done more in 3 weeks than most presidents have done in an entire administration.
You say that no one questioned. It was questioned by the Republican chair of the House Oversight Committee, Jason Chaffetz, so that is hardly no one. Let me move on, though, to the question of...
So you see Stephen Miller threw in that whole thing about how Donald Trump has done more in his first few weeks than some presidents do in their first term of their administration, which is, that's like some sort of weird Trumpism that makes no sense and I don't think has any factual basis. Not that anything he was just saying there has much of a factual basis. It's like there's a violation of federal ethics laws, and then the way to combat it is with talking points that are made up of alternative facts. He's saying that there was someone who was treated very unfairly, which is Ivanka Trump being dropped by Nordstrom's because her sales had really dropped, which is a business decision. So she wasn't treated unfairly. So point one, that's an alternative fact. And then after she was treated unfairly, the president stuck up for a member of his family. Well, I mean, that's true to an extent, but it totally obscures the whole conflict of interest where Ivanka Trump has supposedly cut her ties with her business so that she can work in the White House. But now there is like a total admission from Donald Trump and his senior advisor there that those business ties haven't been cut. So there's a total conflict of interest that they said didn't exist anymore. So that's sort of the lie that's bundled up in part two. And then the third part was that it was a lighthearted, flippant comment that no one could take as a violation of the law, which that's just a total misrepresentation. You know, I think they even showed a clip in that NBC Meet the Press roundup of the bad news for Donald Trump I showed earlier in the program. And it was on Fox and Friends. It's all over the place. You can find it. She didn't sound like she was joking to me. She sounded like she was trying to drum up business for Ivanka Trump, which is a violation of federal law. But, of course, the big problem with my analysis and any reasonable analysis of her violation of the law is that who prosecutes federal law? Well, that is Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, the newly sworn-in Attorney General of the United States. And so it's basically up to the president and his attorney general whether Kellyanne Conway gets disciplined or whether she gets prosecuted. And so you know what the answer to that question is. And that's actually a topic that was covered a little later in ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos when he had on the ranking Democrat on the House Oversight Committee who signed that letter, along with Jason Chaffetz, the Republican, who was actually interested in looking into this violation, and Elijah Cummings is the Democrat, and he mentions in his answer to George Stephanopoulos that it's basically up to the president and his attorney general, or the president, I think is what he says here, as to whether Kellyanne Conway gets disciplined. So I think we know what's going to happen, but I'll talk about that just a little more after we watch that clip together, the last clip on the Nordstrom issue, Donald Trump versus Nordstrom, over here.
Stephen Miller from the White House. Let's begin with Kellyanne Conway. You wrote that letter along with Congressman Chaffetz to the head of the Office of Government Ethics, asking him to recommend disciplinary action against Kellyanne Conway. Stephen Miller says it was a lighthearted, flippant response being blown way out of proportion by the media.
No, that's absolutely incorrect. As a matter of fact, George, this was a textbook case of a violation of the law. You cannot go out there as an employee of the government and advertise for Ivana Trump or anybody else, their products. You can't do that. And anybody else would be subject to a minimum probably of a reprimand, or they could literally lose their job over this in any other department. So that's just absolutely not true. It was not flippant. As a matter of fact, she made it clear, I am going to give some free advertisement today for Ivana Trump. That's just not right. It was wrong. When there's a violation of the law, it is up to us in the Oversight Committee to take a look at it, and that's what we're doing. And you're right. After I asked Chairman Chaffetz to join me in looking at this, he agreed that we should send a letter to the ethics group, and so we did that.
What disciplinary action do you think should take place?
Well, I don't know. That's why we want them to take a thorough look, the Office of Government Ethics, to take a thorough look at this and see how blatant it was. I personally think it was very blatant. I think it was intentional. And so now they then make a recommendation. The problem here, George, is that the person who will mete out the punishment, if you will be the president. And it seems as if this may not be a big deal to him. But it is a big deal to me, and it's a big deal to Chairman Chaffetz.
It also appears that Mr. Miller didn't want to take questions about General Flynn.
So there you have it. At the end of Representative Elijah Cummings' answer, he gave away the punchline, which is that nothing's going to happen to Kellyanne Conway for basically doing an advertisement for Ivanka Trump, not Ivana Trump. I think maybe Elijah Cummings would have had a little bit more credibility if he could have told the difference between Ivana and Ivanka. I don't know, do all white people look alike? Is that what that was supposed to mean? I don't know. You can let me know what you think down in the comment. So I don't know. Is that racist to call Ivana Trump? I don't know. Well, I think I even made a video a long time ago about whether minorities can be racist, and showed a Michael Eric Dyson clip where he argued that minorities can't be racist, although I didn't agree with it. But now I'm getting way, way off the topic of Nordstrom, and that's the last clip on the Nordstrom topic. So the next topic is a couple clips I want to show on the reporting that came out this week that General Michael Flynn, who is Donald Trump's national security advisor, he said that in these conversations, it came out he had these conversations with the Russian foreign minister while during the transition, while President Obama was still president, and he had conversations with the foreign minister on the same day President Obama imposed sanctions on Russia for Russia hacking the Democratic National Committee and distributing, supposedly, if you believe the intelligence agencies, Russia is responsible for distributing hacked emails from the DNC and from John Podesta, and that made Hillary Clinton look bad during the election, and they did it for the purpose of hurting Hillary Clinton and helping Donald Trump. Well, President Obama put on those sanctions the same day that General Michael Flynn was talking to the Russian ambassador, but he said, I didn't talk about sanctions, and they even sent out Mike Pence, the incoming vice president, to say that I talked to Michael Flynn, and he said, we didn't talk about sanctions. Well, I guess when you talk to the Russian foreign minister, he's actually being wiretapped by U.S. intelligence agencies, and they have a transcript of his conversation with Michael Flynn, according to the news reports. And so they know that he actually did talk about sanctions. So now Michael Flynn is saying, I'm sort of walking that back. It's not that we didn't talk about sanctions, it's I don't remember whether we talked about sanctions, and I want to show two clips on that. And the first one is actually, this is Al Franken on State of the Union talking to Jake Tapper, and he's responding to tweet by Nancy Pelosi saying that Michael Flynn's security clearance should be revoked. And he actually talks about a greater independent investigation into all the ties between Russia and the Trump administration, the Trump campaign, and it's really interesting. Although this beginning part here, there's a little beginning part that might not make any sense about Donald Trump not being normal, but I'm going to play it again in a couple minutes before something, a Bill Maher clip where you'll see it'll make more sense. But this is Al Franken talking about some weird things going on with the National Security Advisor for Donald Trump, and I'll talk about it with you a little more after we watch that clip over here.
You know, that is not the norm for a president of the United States, or actually for a human being.
So let's turn to Michael Flynn. The Washington Post and CNN are reporting that he, according to many government officials, spoke to the Russian ambassador about the Obama sanctions against Russia before President Trump took office, suggesting, hold on there, we'll revisit them after we take office. House Minority Leader Pelosi tweeted last night, General Flynn should be suspended and have his intelligence clearance revoked. Do you agree? What do you think the consequences should be?
Well, you know, I mean, either he was lying about not having discussed that, or he forgot.
You don't believe your smile says you don't believe that he forgot.
I don't think you want a guy who would forget that. Your national security advisor would forget that he was talking about lifting the sanctions with a Russian ambassador. I don't think you want a guy in either of those scenarios to be in that position.
But it's not a Senate confirmable position, so what can you do and what do you think should happen?
Look, there's going to have to be investigations, and an independent investigation into the Trump campaign and the Trump administration's relationship to Russia. Russia interfered in this campaign. We know that, although Trump denied it for a long time. We have not seen the president's income tax. His son said a few years ago that an inordinate amount of money was coming in from Russia, investing in them. The president said that he couldn't release his income tax because he was under audit. You can release your income tax when you're under audit, and also he hasn't provided any proof that he was under audit. There is a lot here that we need to look at, and we need to have an independent investigation on it.
When you say independent, what do you mean? Independent counsel? Select committee?
I think an independent counsel would be terrific, but I know that Lindsey Graham and Sheldon Whitehouse and Judiciary are doing hearings and an investigation. I trust those guys. There's something going on in intelligence, but that is so opaque. We need something transparent, and we need an investigation, because we don't know what he owes Russia. We don't know how many Russian oligarchs have invested in his business. We don't know. You know, he has sidled up to Putin in so many ways. You know, what he's doing in Syria is great.
Yeah.
He didn't, you know, annex Crimea, going after NATO. There's something. He's got a bit of a Putin crush, and there's. I want to know how much of that is tied to maybe financial strings.
Let's turn to the president's travel ban.
So yeah, wow, Senator Al Franken there seems to have a real detailed set of possibilities as to how Donald Trump's campaign and administration may be linked to Russia. And I've been reading some journalism and also some conspiracy theories that go, you know, that run the gamut up to, you know, there are people who say that he's being blackmailed based on these prostitute videos, which of course there's no verification for, and that was like the whole golden shower thing that came up a few weeks ago, right around Trump's inauguration. And then there's this idea that Al Franken was bringing up there, which I've seen some more substantive reporting into about business ties between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin and the oligarchs that run Russia. And I even saw some conspiracy theory about there was some amount of nationalized oil stock from Russia that went to some anonymous bidder that could be Donald Trump getting paid off for later lifting sanctions on Russia. And I don't know if there's anything behind any of that, and that's why I am glad that people like Senator Al Franken are saying there's going to be bipartisan independent investigations into all that. Although, is that going to happen? I don't know if that's going to happen, but I want to show one more clip on this. This is actually on Fox News Sunday. They covered this. This is a softball question, I think, at the beginning to a Democratic senator, Senator Ben Cardin, where they actually show a clip of incoming Vice President, then actually Indiana Governor Mike Pence, back in January, talking to Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday, where he was basically vouching for National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, saying they didn't discuss sanctions in this time during the transition, which would have been, practicing foreign policy without a license. No, it's actually a violation of. He talks about a violation of a law from 200 years ago, Senator Ben Cardin, and what he's talking about is the Logan Act, which at first I thought, wait, the Logan Act, does that mean that any wife of Donald Trump over the age of 30 has to be terminated? Wait, no, that's Logan's Run, or no, but no, the Logan Act, I'll explain what the Logan Act is after we watch this clip from Democratic Senator Ben Cardin talking to Chris Wallace on Fox News this morning over here.
So I'm going to turn subject to you. U.S. officials now say that, contrary to previous denials, that the president's national security advisor, retired General Michael Flynn, did discuss U.S. sanctions with the Russian ambassador before he took office in December, at the very time that President Obama was imposing new sanctions because of Russia's role in interfering in the election. Here's an exchange that I had before the inauguration with Vice President Pence. Did Mike Flynn ever discuss lifting sanctions in any of those conversations? Do you know?
I talked to General Flynn yesterday, and the conversations that took place at that time were not in any way related to new U.S. sanctions against Russia or the expulsion of diplomats.
Despite that, the White House said yesterday that President Trump still has, quote, full confidence in Michael Flynn as his national security advisor. Question to you.
No, I think what General Flynn did with the vice president, misleading him or giving him wrong information, that's not the type of person you want to have around you giving you advice. So I think he has very much questioned his credibility. We need to get to the bottom of this, but it goes broader than just General Flynn. The relationship between Russia and our elections is something that needs to be independently investigated. I've called for an independent commission similar to what we had in 9/11. Russia attacked us. We need to have an independent investigation, and General Flynn's comments just add to our concern about the relationship with Russia.
Well, one of the reasons that all of this has come out is because apparently the FBI or the NSA, one of our intelligence agencies, doing what they should do, had electronic signal intelligence on any conversation the Russian ambassador was having. I'm sure they do it to our people in Moscow. So they knew what went on in this conversation. Should Congress, and you as the top Democrat on the Foreign Relations Committee, should there be an investigation of what exactly it is that Michael Flynn said? And I guess a larger question a lot of people are asking, what's wrong? In about a month, he was going to be the national security advisor. What's wrong with him at that point talking to the Russian ambassador about what the policy was on sanctions?
We have one president at a time. That president's conducting a major foreign policy initiative by imposing sanctions for Russia's attack on the United States. That message had to be clear, and if someone was trying to undermine that in a private conversation with the president President of Russia, that's wrong, and that's why a law was passed a couple hundred years ago to make that illegal. What our concern is, what is the relationship? Why did Russia do what it did in our elections? Russia is continuing to be active, not just in the United States, but in Western Europe in these elections. We got to get to the bottom of this as to what Russia is employing in order to try to bring down our democratic system of government. Yes, there should be investigations in Congress, and there's some that are starting and taking place, but there needs to be an independent investigation where people devote their full time to finding out what Russia was doing, why they did it, who was involved here in the United States, and making sure this never happens again.
Let's take a look at where we stand.
So you saw Senator Ben Cardin there saying some similar things to what Senator Al Franken said in the previous clip about how there needs to be an independent investigation of all these ties between Donald Trump's campaign and his administration and Russia and Vladimir Putin, and that seems to be so true that even Republicans like Lindsey Graham are coming to the side of Democrats who want to have an investigation, so maybe that will actually happen. And when Senator Ben Cardin there was talking about how 200 years ago we passed a law making, we have one president at a time, and so the president is the only one who can conduct foreign policy. That's actually what the Logan Act is. It just says that the private citizens can't conduct foreign policy without, the authority, without getting permission from the actual, federal government, the executive branch. They have the authority to conduct foreign policy and nobody else, and it's actually illegal to do otherwise. It's a violation of the Logan Act that I was joking about before that clip. Maybe it was kind of a lame joke, or as my daughter would say, a dad joke. Isn't that like a whole meme genre, the dad joke? Maybe that was a dad joke. I am a dad, so whatever. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section about whether there's a violation of the Logan Act, or about my Logan Act, my Logan Run joke, or about anything you want to say about the connection between Donald Trump and the Russians. It's actually something that is really troubling and not getting enough attention, and I only had those 2 clips to show you. But so the next topic, and I have 7 clips on this next topic. It's about the resistance to Donald Trump, and resistance is not futile. I'm actually been watching Star Trek for quite a while, rewatching all of the old Star Treks as I exercise on my exercise bicycle, and I watch them with my daughter. And we started with Deep Space Nine for some reason, because I think that's the one I was rewatching, and she came in and saw me rewatching it, and so we restarted it, and then we have been watching almost all of them, and I'm watching Voyager now with 7 of 9, so I know resistance is not futile, and this is the resistance to Donald Trump. And I think I have 7 clips to show you on that topic, starting with one from Al Franken talking to Bill Maher on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, talking about how he would respond if he were in the room when Donald Trump brought up one of these weird voter fraud claims, like he supposedly did again, talking to some senators recently, including Democratic senators. And then at the end of this clip, there will be something Al Franken says that explains something he said at the beginning of the previous clip I showed, where he was talking to Jake Tapper, which I'll play again and make that point so you understand what it is I'm talking about, which you obviously can't understand until I play that clip again and you watch this clip. So let's watch it together and talk about it after we watch it. This is from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher last Friday over here.
Last question now, then I'll let you go. I appreciate your time. Okay. Politico says that there was a meeting yesterday, and Donald Trump, with 10 senators, 6 of whom were Democrats. And Donald Trump said to Kelly Ayotte, who was the Republican senator from New Hampshire, who lost narrowly, as he did in New Hampshire. Donald Trump said in this meeting, thousands of people were brought in on buses from neighboring Massachusetts to illegally vote in New Hampshire. So once again, the president is seeing multitudes that no one else sees. And it said there was an awkward silence. An awkward silence, and there were 6 Democratic senators in the room. I would hope that if you were one of those senators, you wouldn't have just been awkwardly silent, and you would have said, no, excuse me, Mr. President, that didn't happen.
I would have said something like that.
You would have.
I would have said, oh, come on.
What?
You got to stop doing this, Mr. President.
Right.
Just stop it. I mean, the 3 to 5 million illegal people didn't show up and vote for all of them for Hillary, and it didn't happen. And just stop doing that. It it's very disturbing. And I asked Jeff Sessions about this in the judiciary hearings, and I said, the Attorney General is the one in charge of the laws in this country, including election laws. Did you kind of discuss this with him? Are you concerned about this? And this is very, very, very disturbing that the president has a habit of either imagining things or making stuff up. That's not, it's really outside the norm of not just of presidents, but of human beings.
All right, Al, you were great at the hearings. We love you for it. Senator Al Franken.
So yeah, that was a great interview with Senator Al Franken on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, and that entire interview is available on YouTube for free at a link down in the video description. But you saw how he made that joke at the end about how what Donald Trump did is not normal for, a president or even a human being, and got a big laugh. Well, if you were wondering what Al Franken was saying at the beginning of the clip I showed from CNN's State of the Union with Jake Tapper, well, that was actually what he was talking about here. I'll play the very beginning of that clip. You can see he made that same joke, but didn't get a laugh with no audience over here.
That is not the norm for a president of the United States, or actually for a human being.
So let's turn to Michael Flynn.
But he did get a laugh from Jake Tapper, and he actually got several laughs from Jake Tapper. It seems like Al Franken is not trying to be completely straight, or in terms of not being humorous. I don't mean in terms of his sexual orientation, but that for a lot of years when he first came into the Senate, since he used to be on Saturday Night Live, he decided he was not going to make any jokes whatsoever and be a very, very serious person. But he definitely, if you watch the entire interview with Jake Tapper on CNN's State of the Union, he was definitely willing to make more jokes, and you saw that. That's why I showed the beginning of that Jake Tapper clip over there to show he was still making the joke he made with Bill Maher on Friday on HBO's Real Time. But this next clip is again from Al Franken on CNN's State of the Union, and this is a clip talking about how he would resist if he was in the room when Donald Trump referred to Elizabeth Warren as Pocahontas and being the face of the Democratic Party. And it's kind of similar to what he said to Bill Maher about how he would respond if he was in the room when Donald Trump made one of these weird delusional voter fraud claims. And I wanted to show how he talked about it with Jake Tapper in terms of Elizabeth Warren and Pocahontas. And I will discuss that with you a little more after we watch that clip together. Over here.
Senator Elizabeth Warren and the increasingly prominent role she's playing in the Democratic Party. Let me show you what President Trump said about her this week. He was meeting privately with 10 senators at the White House, and he told the Democrats in the room, Pocahontas is now the face of your party. That's an obvious reference to the controversy over Elizabeth Warren's claim of Native American heritage. What's your response when you see that Pocahontas is now the face of your party?
I heard this from a couple of my colleagues who were there, and I would have said something. I mean, I'm not...
What would you have said?
I said, Mr. President, with all due respect, that's racist. Please stop doing that. I'm on Indian Affairs. This is completely unacceptable. You really should stop doing this. It doesn't serve anybody. Something like that.
I want to ask you a question about...
So that's, again, Al Franken saying how he wants to be part of the resistance. He wants to stand up to Donald Trump. If he were one of the senators in the room when he made this Pocahontas reference, he would have stood up to him and said, that's racist. Like, he would have stood up to him if he was in the room when he had made this delusional statement about voters being bussed in from New Hampshire. But I actually skipped over a clip. This is a clip where it's from Saturday Night Live, where they actually had Kate McKinnon on doing her Elizabeth's, talking about Pocahontas, This is Kate McKinnon doing her Elizabeth Warren impression, which is actually a pretty spot-on impression in terms of her voice and her speech pattern. I think she gets it down really well. The jokes themselves aren't quite as funny, so you get like realism, but not extreme humor in the jokes, I don't think. But I'll just discuss that a little more after you watch about. It's not the whole thing. This is another one of the Saturday Night Live videos that's available free on YouTube at a link down in the video description. This is about 2 minutes from that video over here.
This week, Senator Elizabeth Warren was told to stand down on the Senate floor while reading a letter by Coretta Scott King. Here to comment is Elizabeth Warren.
Good morning to you both, and thank you. This isn't going to be fun, but it is necessary, so let's dive right in.
Yeah, let's do that. Now, Senator, how did you feel about being told to sit down by Mitch McConnell?
Oh, well, he did try to shut me up, but nevertheless, I persisted in making Twitter my bee. I will never stop rooting out corruption, which brings me to my first point. Anchor Joe's. We'll begin with a simple yes or no question. It says here that you and Michael Che are credited as full cast members on this show. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, are you questioning me? Or?
Yeah, yet you only perform on a 10-minute segment entitled, I think I have it here, it's called Weekend Update. Is that, yes?
That's correct, yes.
And yet you collect the same paycheck of a cast member who appears throughout the entire show. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's not really the way it works, Senator.
And is it not also true that you are currently a board member for Goldman Sachs?
That is not true.
All right.
No, why does everyone keep asking me that?
Well, I think it is the hair.
Okay. Now, it feels like you're always working. You're always on the job, Senator. Aren't there other Democrats who can help you out with this?
Well, no, it's just me. It's me and Bernie and Schumer. That's Amy Schumer. Which brings me to my next order of business. Now, Anchor Joe's, is it not true that as a television personality, you receive freebies and swag bags from such companies as Pop Chips, Chapstick, and Jamba Juice?
Okay, yeah, occasionally, yeah, we get free stuff, but we don't let it affect what we do. Right, Che? Nope.
Yes, let the record show that Michael Che is currently guzzling a razzmatazz smoothie.
Okay.
That was like product placement on Saturday Night Live. They were like attacking product placement by actually engaging in product placement. That was like some weird meta joke, but I didn't think the jokes were that funny there, but I thought the impression of Elizabeth Warren was spot on pretty much by Kate McKinnon. She is like quite the performer, and I think they've been giving her, she even in a clip I didn't show from the cold open, she actually did an impression of Senator Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, the new U.S. Attorney General. But that's also, if you look down in the video description, there's a link to the Sean Spicer cold open, and that includes the Kate McKinnon Attorney General Jeff Sessions impression that you can look at if you're interested in that. But I actually noticed I skipped over a clip because I was going back and forth between the Al Franken clip on Bill Maher and the earlier Al Franken clip to show you how he used that same joke. And when Al Franken was talking about Trump's delusional statements about all these people being bussed over into New Hampshire to from Massachusetts for voter fraud, that's why Kelly Ayotte lost and why Trump didn't win New Hampshire. Well, that wasn't just some statement from Donald Trump in the past to these senators. It was actually defended by his spokesperson, his senior advisor, Stephen Miller, in this clip from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos that I mistakenly skipped over. This is clip 16, where he renews the whole voter fraud thing, and it's totally disingenuous, this argument. If you know the difference between voter registration fraud and fraud requires someone trying to fool someone, like a misrepresentation where you're saying something untrue to mislead someone, when a lot of these duplicate registrations or people who register by mistake and never vote, there's a very big difference between voter registration fraud, or some of this is just voter registration errors, and actual voter fraud where people vote who aren't allowed to vote. That's different from registration. But Stephen Miller, talking to George Stephanopoulos, tries to totally conflate the two, as I will discuss after you watch that clip I mistakenly skipped over earlier, clip number 16 over here.
Let me move on, though, to the question of voter fraud as well. President Trump again this week suggested in a meeting with senators that thousands of illegal voters were bused from Massachusetts to New Hampshire, and that's what caused his defeat in the state of New Hampshire, also the defeat of Senator Kelly Ayotte. That has provoked a response from a member of the Federal Election Commission, Ellen Weintraub, who says, "I call upon the president to immediately share New Hampshire voter fraud evidence so that his allegations may be investigated promptly." Do you have that evidence?
I've actually, having worked before on a campaign in New Hampshire, I can tell you that this issue of busing voters into New Hampshire is widely known by anyone who's worked in New Hampshire politics. It's very real. It's very serious. This morning on this show is not the venue for me to lay out all the evidence, but I can tell you this. Voter fraud is a serious problem in this country. You have millions of people who are registered in 2 states or who are dead or who are registered to vote, and you have 14% of non-citizens, according to academic research, at a minimum, are registered to vote, which is an astonishing statistic.
You can't hold on a second. You just claimed again that there was illegal voting in New Hampshire, people bused in from the state of Massachusetts. Do you have any evidence to back that up?
George, go to New Hampshire, talk to anybody who's worked in politics there for a long time. Everybody's aware of the problem in New Hampshire with respect to
I'm asking you as the White House senior
hold
on a second. I'm asking you as the White House senior policy advisor. The president made a statement saying he was the victim of voter fraud, people being bused from Massachusetts and New Hampshire.
The president was.
Do you have any evidence?
If this is an issue that interests you, then we can talk about it more in the future. And we now have our governance beginning to get stood up, but we have a Department of Justice and we have more officials. And the issue of voter fraud is something we're going to be looking at very seriously and very hard. But the reality is that we know for a fact you have massive numbers of non-citizens registered to vote in this country. Nobody disputes that. And many, many highly qualified people, like Chris Kobach, the Kansas Secretary of State, have looked deeply into this issue and have confirmed it to be true and have put together evidence. And I suggest you invite Chris Kobach onto your show, and he can walk you through some of the evidence of voter fraud in greater detail.
All right, just for the record, you have provided absolutely no evidence. The president has made a statement.
The White House has provided enormous evidence with respect to voter fraud, with respect to people being registered in more than one state, dead people voting, non-citizens being registered to vote. George, it is a fact, and you will not deny it, that there are massive numbers of non-citizens in this country who are registered to vote. That is a scandal. We should stop the presses, and as a country, we should be aghast about the fact that you have people who have no right to vote in this country, registered to vote, canceling out the franchise of lawful citizens of this country. That's the story we should be talking about, and I'm prepared to go on any show, anywhere, anytime, and repeat it and say the President of the United States is correct 100%.
Well, you just repeated that. You just made those declarations, but for the record, you have provided zero evidence that the president was the victim of massive voter fraud in New Hampshire. You have provided zero evidence.
Anyone who's worked in New Hampshire politics is familiar with that issue.
You have provided zero evidence that the president's claim that he would have won the popular vote if 3 to 5 million illegal immigrants hadn't voted. Zero evidence for either one of those claims.
Well, it's
Thanks a lot for joining us this morning.
The non-citizen voting issue is pervasive and widespread, and we are going to protect our country from voter fraud. We're going to protect our borders from terrorism, and we're going to protect innocent men, women, and children from violent, criminal, illegal immigrants that need to be removed from this country. And our country will create jobs, safety, prosperity, and security, particularly for disenfranchised working people of every background, faith, and ethnicity in this country.
You can start by providing evidence to back up your claims. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Up next, 2 Democrats taking...
Well, I think George Stephanopoulos did a good job of pointing out over and over again that Stephen Miller was providing absolutely no evidence of voter fraud, although, like I said before I showed the clip, I think he could have done a little bit better job of showing the way that Stephen Miller was conflating voter registration fraud, or not even fraud, just like voter registration errors, like errors in state voter registration rolls, with actual voter fraud where people vote fraudulently, that's a whole different thing from what's on the registration rolls. That was something they did with the whole Acorn scandal years and years ago, back at the beginning of the Obama administration, where some of the people who worked for Acorn registering voters, like, put a whole bunch of fake voters into their registration. They would go out and with these clipboards and get all these people to sign up, and then they put fake people in there so that they would get more money from Acorn, basically, because they were illegally letting people get paid per voter, and they're not supposed to do that. But the whole thing is that if you put, like, Donald Duck down as a fake voter, that's voter registration fraud, but that doesn't actually result in a fake person actually voting. No one is actually showing up and saying, I am Donald Duck, let me vote. Well, I can't do a Donald Duck impression. I will not do a Donald Duck impression. Maybe not. I've been doing what I've been calling the Toby the Turtle, but apparently is actually Cecil the Turtle. That, there's no actual Mitch McConnell clips on tonight, so I guess I could, she was warned and she persisted. Yup. That would be from the whole Elizabeth Warren thing, but that's my Cecil the Turtle impression, apparently, not Toby the Turtle, because I was corrected on that in the comment section, and I looked it up, and it seemed like it was actually Cecil the Turtle from Bugs Bunny and not Toby the Turtle, which was a whole different animal, so to speak. But as I said, I played these clips out of order, and I want to show one more Al Franken clip. As I said, he kind of joked around with Jake Tapper, and Jake Tapper made a couple jokes with him. I think Al Franken is getting ready to be more of a jokester, using humor as a weapon, which is actually, in the era of Donald Trump, humor, if you have to laugh if you don't want to cry, or I don't know, humor is actually a good weapon against someone who's so ridiculous and pompous in a lot of ways. And that isn't the subject of this next clip. It was actually where Jake Tapper tried to use humor, and you can tell me if you think if it was a good use of humor or it kind of falls flat, which sometimes is the case. This is the last Al Franken clip, I think. Talking to Jake Tapper about how Al Franken may actually step up and be a very big part of the resistance in a way I will discuss after we watch this quick clip together here.
Possibility of you running for president. And there is buzz out there. I'm sure you've heard it.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you a personal question.
Yes.
Is there ever a time when you hear this buzz and you're at home, you look in the mirror, and you say to yourself, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. Maybe I should be president?
No, that's never happened. That has never happened. But I appreciate the shout out to my character, Stuart Smalley, which is an extremely popular character on Saturday night.
Senator Franken, thank you so much for being here. Always good to have you, sir.
Jake.
Good to see you. Have a good Sunday.
I don't know. That was did that fall flat? But the Stuart Smalley reference might have fallen flat. But the idea of Al Franken running for president, that is actually in some ways kind of appealing. That the way that Saturday Night Live has really gotten under the skin of Donald Trump, and to have a Saturday Night Live alum who could really challenge Donald Trump. And Al Franken is a very smart guy, and he even said at the beginning, this is actually the Al Franken millennium. That would be a, I don't know, I just started to think about that after watching this clip for the second or third time, and that's something to think about. I think that might actually be a good thing. Al Franken versus Donald Trump in 2020. I mean, Elizabeth Warren also, we were showing, talking about that and showing clips earlier, so that's also another possibility. The next clip I want to show is another real outside possibility to replace or to run against Donald Trump in 2020, and that's Senator Bernie Sanders. He would be older than most presidential candidates, but to totally rule him out is kind of ageism. Bill Maher's made that point regarding California the governor of California, Jerry Brown, in the past, who would have been a great presidential candidate if he wasn't, so old. And that's also a problem with Bernie Sanders. But he makes some of the same arguments that you can see Al Franken make on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. If you watch his whole interview, at a link I put down in the video description about Donald Trump being delusional and a pathological liar, and there's a lot of evidence for that, and Bernie Sanders, I think, backs it up, as I will discuss after we watch that clip from, this is from NBC's Meet the Press talking to Chuck Todd this morning in clip number 20. Over here.
Some of your former staffers, including Nick Brana, has a draft Bernie for a People's Party movement. Essentially, they want to start a new political party. In this statement, it said this: despite Bernie Sanders' monumental endeavor to bring people into the Democratic Party, people are leaving it by the millions. The collective efforts to reform the party cannot stem the tide of people who are going independent, let alone expand the Democratic base. What do you say to those efforts?
Well, I say two things. Right now, we are in a pivotal moment in American history. We have a president who is delusional in many respects, a pathological liar, somebody who is trying to divide us up.
Can you work
strong words.
Can you work with a pathological liar?
Well, it makes life very difficult, not just for me. And I don't mean, you know, I know it is very harsh, but I think that's the truth. When somebody goes before you and the American people say 3 to 5 million people voted illegally in the last election, nobody believes that. There is not the scintilla of evidence. What would you call that remark? It's a lie. It's a delusion. But second of all, to answer your question, I think what we need to do right now is focusing on bringing the American people together around a progressive agenda. American people want to raise the minimum wage. They want to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. They want the wealthiest people in this country to start paying their fair share of taxes. They want the United States to join the rest of the industrialized world and guarantee health care to all people as a right.
So if the Democratic Party isn't that vehicle, then you would support something like that? But you still believe the Democratic Party is that vehicle?
Right now, Chuck, I am working to bring fundamental reform to the Democratic Party, to open the doors of the Democratic Party to working people, to lower income people, to young people who have not felt welcome in the embrace of the Democratic Party.
All right, I got to leave it there. Senator.
So I think Senator Bernie Sanders does seem committed to the Democratic Party there, although his viability as a candidate, his viability as a candidate, I guess, is better than what I saw down in the comment section. Oh, what is it? What is going on? Oh, I don't know what that was about. Can you say? Oh, here it is. Isaac posted LiberalViewer 2020. That is not a viable candidacy. I don't think Bernie Sanders' candidacy is that viable, but I guess you can never rule him out. Al Franken is more intriguing. Elizabeth Warren, of course, is in some ways like the front runner. I don't know, but it's a long way to 2020, and there's a lot of different ways that the resistance can go, and I just really like what I heard Bernie Sanders say in that last clip, and it's similar to, like I said, what Al Franken was saying about Donald Trump being delusional and a liar and possibly mentally ill, and you know, I hate to be so critical of the President of the United States, but we've never had a President of the United States in my lifetime other than maybe Richard Nixon, which is when I was in, you know, when I was like, he was elected when I was just a few years old and impeached before I was 10 years old, so I don't have that much memory of Richard Nixon. Well, I think it's been that long, at least, since we've had a president who was as aptly described as a pathological liar, delusional, mentally ill, all those things kind of applied to Nixon, and Donald Trump is exhibiting those types of, I mean, am I wrong, people? You can let me know down in the comment section. But before I leave the subject of the resistance, the next clip I want to show is of one more person who I think is a big part of the resistance. This is the highest ranking Democrat, showing how he's going to resist Donald Trump. And this is in terms of his Supreme Court nominee, Neil Gorsuch. if you heard Stephen Miller, he called him Gorsuch. Most people call him Neil Gorsuch, but I think his actual name is pronounced Neil Gorsuch. That maybe that will come out in the hearings. That will be a subject of very strong cross-examination by someone. Is it Gorsuch or Gorsuch? We need to know. This is important before you become a Supreme Court justice in the United States. How are we supposed to pronounce your last name? But here's Chuck Schumer talking about how he thinks there's a big bait and switch going on, and how he's going to really use the hearings to cross-examine Neil Gorsuch or however you want to say it, and how he thinks they may be pulling the wool over our eyes like they did on John Roberts, as I will discuss after we watch that last clip on the subject of the resistance over here.
Based on the Supreme Court nominee, Judge Neil Gorsuch, which the president has put forward, you wrote in the New York Times that he, quote, refused to answer rudimentary questions in your interview with him, and you said that was a real challenge. But both Democratic and Republican nominees for that court spot in the past have refused to answer questions all the time. That's what they do. So this doesn't seem to me to be something that's particularly new for a Supreme Court justice or one that's been nominated to refuse to answer questions they might have to rule on if they get on the bench.
Okay, what's particularly new, John, is that we have a president who is overreaching dramatically, who shows little respect for rule of law, who seems to violate the Constitution in his first 3 weeks, and intimidates judges who have cases before them. This demands a new standard, a much more independent justice than in the past, because after all, the Supreme Court is our last refuge against a president who overreaches, who doesn't respect balance of power. Now, I sat with Judge Gorsuch, and I said, show me you're independent. He said, well, I am independent. I said, show me. And I asked him some very specific questions that he should answer. These are not about existing cases. I said, if there was a law that said all Muslims are banned from the United States, would that be unconstitutional? That has nothing to do with the case before him, or before us, before the court. He wouldn't answer. I asked him, what's his opinion of Citizens United, an awful case, or the Shelby case, which undid voting rights? He wouldn't answer. I asked him, what's his view of some conservative legal scholars who have said President Trump should not attack?
Let me ask you quickly, Senator.
So he wouldn't answer anything. I just want to say one more thing. I had the eerie feeling I was sitting just the same as with Judge Roberts when he was a judge. He wouldn't answer any questions. He said he'd call balls and strikes. He got into office. He became an activist judge and moved the country far to the right, favoring special interests over working people.
Final question, Senator. Just he did mention, though, that he thought it was disheartening that the President Trump's comments about the judiciary. And if you look at his record, he has clashed with the idea of giving deference to the executive branch on regulatory questions. So if you look at his record, he has not, he's shown separation from the executive and his words as well.
Well, I asked him, would he publicly condemn what President Trump did with the existing judge, which any judge worth his salt should do. He refused. He said to me, I'm disheartened. Now, his handlers were sitting there and they whispered, you can make that public. So this was not, you can't behind closed doors, you can't behind closed doors whisper to a senator and then not say anything. And then when President Trump attacked and said he didn't mean me, they all said, yeah, he didn't mean President Trump. That was a further indication of his lack of independence.
All right, Senator, we're going to have to leave it there.
Sure.
Senator Schumer, thanks so much for being with us.
I really like what Senator Chuck Schumer did there at the end, where he explained the whole media strategy they had, where they had Neil Gorsuch, or Gorsuch, however you pronounce it, say he was disheartened by the comments attacking the judiciary from Donald Trump. But then, you know, and you can say that publicly, but then the Trump administration came out and said, oh, he didn't mean Trump, and it was like all for show to try to make him look independent, but he was part of this whole strategy that was being orchestrated by his handlers and the Trump administration. And I think that was a good argument from Chuck Schumer, and very revealing about what happened. I don't know why John Dickerson was so intent on defending Neil Gorsuch and how, like, middle of the road and anti, you know, how pro separation of powers he is and what a good judge he's gonna be. I've read a lot of things about him being very, you know, he's kind of like Antonin Scalia, which, you know, what do we, you know, let's progress a little. move the court a little to the left. We should have, you know, Merrick Garland or anyway. So like I said, that's the last clip I want to show on the resistance to Donald Trump. Chuck Schumer is basically the highest ranking Democrat right now, so he's the head of the resistance as we know it. Is resistance futile? You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. So like I said, I have just a few clips here at the end on these ICE raids and Donald Trump's immigration policy, where, I mean, Barack Obama actually did not have a great immigration policy. You know, I worked in immigrants' rights over the last several years, especially here in California, where we tried to separate federal immigration enforcement from local law enforcement. It's really important for public safety, where we don't have local law enforcement engaging in federal immigration enforcement, so that the undocumented immigrants who live in our communities aren't afraid to talk to the police when they're victims of crime or even witnesses to crime. If they can't talk to the police in those situations, it makes us all less safe. So it's actually a public safety concern. And the other part is that immigrants, including undocumented immigrants, are less likely to commit crimes than the general population. So trying to make them look like criminals is really disingenuous, which is something I will show Stephen Miller try to do in a minute. But first I want to show like this really emotional clip I saw on AM Joy on MSNBC yesterday that shows the way families are really being torn apart. It's not like an abstract issue, it's hurting real people, and I couldn't explain it better than this 30-second clip from Joyanne Reid sort of teasing her following segment, which I'm not going to show anymore, just this 30-second clip that shows an American citizen, a little girl who's an American citizen who's being caused a lot of pain by these ICE raids that are going on, as I will discuss after we watch that clip together here.
Later in the show, we'll talk to the family of a woman who's being called the first victim of Trump's immigration raids. And we'll have more on the ICE raids that are sending shudders through immigrant communities, including mothers and children.
Recently, 8-year-old Kelly heard a knock on the door. It was immigration officials with questions for Kelly's mother, who is undocumented. Kelly so traumatized she had a panic attack and was hospitalized. Her father has been detained. She is now terrified of losing her mother as well.
I mean, how can you watch that clip and, you know, not get choked up? I mean, that's horrible. I mean, these are real people. These are human beings who are, I mean, these are real families who are being torn apart for no reason. And, I mean, it's not just an emotional problem, you know, that it's bad optics for the Trump administration. This is something we went through in California, and this is, you know, I teased this at the beginning of the show where I said I was going to explain how even though there's no, like, discernible loss from Donald Trump right now on his ICE crackdowns, that if he continues this policy, it could really be his biggest loss in the long run. We kind of went through this in California back several years ago with Governor Pete Wilson and this Proposition 187 that was supposed to deny public services to immigrants. And, you know, California is kind of like the vanguard of the nation in terms of the demographics. This was kind of the same thing that's happening nationally, where it was kind of the last gasp of the white majority in California before California became a minority state, which is kind of an oxymoron. How can minorities be a majority? But, you know, that's in what's going on in California, and it's going to happen in the United States. And, you know, Republicans had some success, and Pete Wilson, the Republican governor of California, he had some success with these anti-immigrant policies for a very brief period. And then the whole thing backfired and created this backlash where now in California we have this great government where Democrats have a supermajority in our legislature. We have a Democratic governor, and our state is actually in really good shape. We're in a lot better shape than most of the nation, because back then they tried to, like, go against the immigrants before the demographics went against them. And now Republicans are stigmatized in California. They have some members in the legislature in, the rural areas, but Democrats rule here, and it's because Republicans overreached. And if you want to see Republican overreach in a lot of rhetoric that doesn't match the facts, well, here's this next clip, the last Stephen Miller clip, the senior advisor to Donald Trump, defending these immigration raids. This is also from CBS's Face the Nation. Oh, I'm sorry. This is from NBC's Meet the Press, talking to Chuck Todd, where Chuck Todd tries to get him to define what a crime is. They're going after people who commit crimes, whatever those crimes might be. And although Chuck Todd talks as if being in the country illegally is a crime, which that's actually not true, as I will discuss after we watch that 3-minute clip together over here.
Appears to be an immigration enforcement surge that has taken place over the last week. And it goes to the other executive order that had to do with immigration that was signed. How do you define a criminal act by an undocumented immigrant in this country? Is just being undocumented here illegally, is that enough of a criminal act to get you deported under this order?
The order describes a criminal offense, which would typically mean anything from a misdemeanor to a felony. In particular, the emphasis is on crimes that threaten or endanger public safety. But as you well know, you cannot order a federal law enforcement officer in ICE any more than you can in the FBI or the DEA or the Marshal Service to ignore the laws of the United States. It would be highly unethical for me in the White House or anybody else to pick up the phone and call an ICE officer and say, well, when you encounter this particular felon, we'd like you to pretend the law doesn't exist. But I can tell you right now, there are enforcement actions happening all over this country in which gang members, drug dealers, sex offenders are being swept up.
Felons. What about if the only crime they committed was being here illegally? Is that enough to be deported?
Sean, an immigration judge makes those decisions. An ICE officer makes those decisions. I in the White House don't make those decisions.
So you've not told them to prioritize or in either direction?
If people don't like the immigration laws of the United States, they can reform them. Our emphasis is on deporting and removing criminal aliens who pose a threat to public safety. And I just want to say this. There's been a lot of coverage in the news about the effects of these enforcement actions on people who are here illegally. And that's an issue people are free to discuss. But what's more important and what should be discussed more is the lives that are being saved, Chuck. The American lives that are being saved because we're taking enforcement action. And when we didn't take those actions in the past, you have families like the Wilkerson family and the Root family and the Mendoza family who lost people they loved because we were more concerned about the effects of enforcement on people here illegally than on the well-being of lawful immigrants and U.S. citizens.
So it sounds to me as if you're saying you did not tell ICE workers who to prioritize.
No, that's not correct. I'm saying that in the White House, it would be improper for me to tell them to disengage from an enforcement action. The president has been clear, unequivocal, and explicit in saying that we're going to focus on removing individuals who pose a threat to public safety, including people who are gang members, who've been charged with criminal offenses, who've been multiple immigration violations, who've been deported and re-entered. I have a question. What would you say, Chuck? What would you say to a family member who lost someone they loved because an illegal immigrant who'd been deported 2 times and had a misdemeanor conviction was allowed to come back into the country a 3rd time because that wasn't deemed a priority and they lost someone they loved? Would you say, well, I'm sorry, it didn't meet our priority scale. We're going to focus on public safety and saving American lives, and we will not apologize for that.
Before I let you go, does the president still have...
So that is Stephen Miller, senior advisor to President Donald Trump, making a whole bunch of specious arguments about how immigrants are somehow criminals. And of course, Chuck Todd actually made the mistake of saying that, is simply being here, being undocumented, being here illegally, is that enough to be a crime? But actually, being in the country illegally is not a crime. It's a civil violation. If you come here on a valid visa but then overstay your visa, that's not a crime. It's just a civil violation. It's not even a speeding ticket. It's like, failing to file some paperwork in some administrative office or that kind of thing. I mean, the biggest consequence is if you overstay your visa, you can be if you leave the United States, you can be barred from returning for, I think, like 5 years. I looked at this. That's like the administrative punishment, but it's not a criminal offense at all. If you sneak over the border, that actually is a misdemeanor, but it's not a felony. And even some of the felonies are kind of bogus. That's actually, this next clip I want to show you is about this case, the supposed, the person who was deemed the first person deported by Donald Trump, or the first victim of his increased enforcement, was this woman in Phoenix who's been here like 20 years, and she's the mother of 2 American citizens, kind of reminiscent of that first emotional clip I showed you. And here she is. Here's the final clip I promised you, where New Jersey Governor Chris Christie is responding to Jake Tapper on CNN's State of the Union, talking about how this woman, who her only crime was a long time ago, she used a fake Social Security number to be an employee at a water park, yet she was being deported, and that was kind of bogus. And here's the last clip, Governor of New Jersey Chris Christie responding to that issue on CNN State of the Union. Jake Tapper, over here.
I want to start by asking you about the ICE raids, because it seems untrue that all of those being deported are dangerous individuals. Let's posit that deporting dangerous people who are here in this country illegally is a good thing. But one of those deported was Guadalupe Garcia de Rayos. In 2008, she illegally used someone else's Social Security number for employment at a water park, for which she was later charged with a felony. The mayor of Phoenix, Greg Stanton, put out a statement after she was removed from the U.S. saying, quote, "ICE is spending its energy deporting a woman with 2 American children who has lived here for more than 2 decades and poses a threat to nobody," unquote. What's your message to the undocumented immigrants in New Jersey, your home state, who are not drug dealers, who are not gang members, who have not committed any sort of violent crime? Should they be worried about being deported?
Well, Jake, this is the problem with the whole failure of the federal government over the course of the last 12 to 16 years in not dealing with trying to reform the immigration system and bring some sense of order to this. When that's the case, then the laws that are in effect right now have to be enforced. And that's what's happening right now. Now, I know that the president's focus and his desire is to make sure that first they get violent criminals out of the United States, people who have been charged with violent acts. That's what I think what ICE is attempting to do. But as I can tell you, Jake, from having run a government for 7 years and been involved for many years as a U.S. attorney, things always don't go perfectly. And so you're going to have some people who also, by the way, have violated the law, but don't fit that one category. But that will be the overwhelming minority in all this. And what people should focus on is what the president is trying to do, which is to keep a campaign promise on making sure that violent criminals who are here illegally are taken out of the country in order to make America's streets safer.
But as you know, Governor, this is a big concern in the Garden State of New Jersey. Princeton officials are distributing information, letting undocumented immigrants know how to avoid deportation. New Brunswick, there's a debate about whether New Brunswick becomes a sanctuary city. What is your message to the citizens of your state about undocumented immigrants who, like the woman I just discussed, are not violent criminals, who have children who are American and are now in fear?
Well, Jake, first off, it should be surprising to no one that institutions like Princeton University, where, by the way, I'm a member of the board as governor of New Jersey, are going to take a very progressive, liberal position towards this, and will try to grandstand this during a time of political debate. Listen, our position has been the same all along. The federal government should be enforcing federal law. And they have to make clear that federal law will be enforced. If that's the president's desire, then he should go ahead and make sure that that's done. On the state level, we're doing the things that we've always done in New Jersey to try to keep our streets safe. That's why our prison population is at an all-time low, and crime declined again in New Jersey this year. So we're doing what we need to do at the state level to keep people safe, and the federal government should be enforcing federal law, and if they don't like the federal law, then they should go to Congress and get it changed.
Let's turn to Russia. CNN has...
Of course, a lot of people tried to change the federal law and comprehensive immigration reform. There was like a bipartisan effort, and it passed the Senate, and it died in the right-wing Republican House during President Obama's administration. So that was kind of a disingenuous argument. But there have been these stream errors down in the live stream, and so I'm going to finish up the show. I hope you appreciated the clips I picked out. If you enjoy the show that I produced for you and my commentary and everything I put together, basically took my whole Sunday. If you want to support that, there's a link you can click on clicking on a little eye in that corner for direct fan funding through YouTube, or I put a link down in the video description. You can be one of my patrons on Patreon. I really appreciate all that support. I appreciate all of you who give me a thumbs up down in the comment section, who post supportive comments. I've been getting a lot of supportive comments. I've been getting a lot of views these last few weeks, which I think in some ways has to do with getting traffic from people looking for clips of Saturday Night Live and Bill Maher, which I provide those clips, and I also provide commentary so that it's a fair use video. And I'll be back next week with I know Saturday Night Live. I think Bill Maher will still be here, but there won't be any Melissa McCarthy or Alec Baldwin. It'll be Bill Maher, and I know he has Milo Yiannopoulos coming up sometime soon. I don't know if it's next week, but I'll keep covering the political comedy and the big five corporate outlets, the corporate news media. I hope you enjoy the clips I picked out and the way I try to explain them, and I will be back next week, and hopefully I'll put out some edited, produced videos. If not, just the live stream, and until whatever I have time to put up, I guess I'll be seeing all of you around.